Good evening, councillors. I will ask when we are going to go behind closed doors for confidential business. I will then ask councillors to declare if they're in a safe and secure position or location. At the moment, I believe we have one councillor not in attendance. I think that is Councillor Polifka, if I'm correct, who may be running a little bit late. So I will get the meeting underway, it being the allotted hour, and if Councillor Polifka joins us, if somebody could alert me to that so that we can have the minute taker enter him into the meeting. I understand another one of our councillors also has no audio at the moment, Councillor McLennan, and I am hoping that Councillor McLennan can address that issue fairly soon. Okay, so it being 2 minutes past 6, I'll declare this ordinary council meeting for May open. Nalak Karij Nija Buja Bal Wajak Nunga Buja Nalak Nini. In the words of the traditional owners of this land, we together know this land. It Wajak Nunga land, we together sitting. So on behalf of the town of Bassendean, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we meet, the Wajak people of the Noongar Nation. May their campfires burn forever. I have no announcements tonight, so we'll get straight into the meeting. I would ask if there are any apologies, and there you are, Councillor Polifka. So minute clerk, if you could add Councillor Polifka has joined the meeting. Okay, so I don't believe we have any apologies, and I would like to know if there are any applications for leave. And Councillor McLennan can now hear us, so that's good. Are there any applications for leave from councillors? I cannot see any hands going up, so we'll move on. Are there any declarations of interest in any of the items coming before us tonight? Again, I cannot see any hands going up, so we'll move on. Statements by member of the public on an agenda item. Now, I have one statement here from Ms. Jane Bremer of Success Hill. And I'll just read that out. Success Hill Reserve was classified as Class A Reserve in 1922 for the purposes of parks and recreation. Today, it is recognised as one of the most significant and valuable remaining Banksia woodlands on the Swan Coastal Plain. As such, there is an onus on local government, in this case the town of Bassendean, to acknowledge and uphold the protections afforded to all Class A bushland areas which are crowned reserves within their electorate. Now, I believe that, I'll answer this, Ms Davies. I believe that under the history section of page 498 and also page 568 of the agenda states that Success Hill Reserve was gazetted as an A-class reserve in 1922. So that relates to item 12.5, that particular statement. We have now item 7, which is questions from members of the public. I'll just quickly ask before I move on. I'm just checking some late. We have a Mr. Lufa, but he will be asking questions. I will come to that when we get to question time. So I'll run with the questions that we have, additional questions from Ms. Jane Bremer. And the first question is, Can Council please explain why Success Hill Reserve is not described or referred to as a Class A reserve in the listing it has received on the Local Heritage Survey? Now, I believe that it is listed as a Class A reserve. However, Mr. Gibson, if you would like to elaborate on that.
Through you, Madam Mayor, as you've just set out, and as I stated last week, the draft local heritage survey does in fact identify that the Success Hill Reserve is an A-class reserve, and one of the sentences in the relevant section of the document actually says, I'm reading this verbatim, control of the reserve was taken over by the town of Bassendean in 1916 and gazetted as an A-class reserve in 1922. So, as you've already said, the reference is already in there.
Thank you. Mr. Gibson, if you could remain for the next question. Over the last 20 years, there have been many development plans and reports created for Success Hill Reserve. Many, if not all, do not refer to the Class A status of Success Hill Reserve. Some of these plans have included entertainment infrastructure for events. A 10-year management plan for Success Hill Reserve is currently being finalised. The state and federal governments recommend that such plans be advertised prior to endorsement. Will the town of Bassendean advertise this 10-year management plan to the public? Mr. Gibson? Actually, it could be either Mr. Gibson or Ms. Davies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So consultation has been undertaken with relevant friends of, community and environmental groups for each of the natural areas, so for the areas that they're active in. Once the plans are approved by the administration, they'll be published on the website, so will be publicly accessible, and additional engagement and consultation that will be undertaken for specific projects or activities that are proposed, and that will be based on IOP2's public participation spectrum. So, for example, at Success Hill, there will be consultation undertaken during the planning stage for foreshore stabilisation and also in the design of the fence alignment.
Thank you, Ms. Davey. One last question from Ms. Bremer. Will the town of Bassendean include any of this information offered in the listing of Success Hill Reserve on the Local Heritage Survey? If not, why not? I think that must be referring to the A-class listing, which has already been answered. The town has updated references to the original use of the site, so I don't think a staff member needs to answer that question. So that's all the questions from Ms. Brimmer. So we have Mr. Mark Luther, who I believe was going to join the meeting to ask his questions. However, I cannot see Mr. Luther on this screen, and I'm just confirming with staff that Mr. Luther has not joined the meeting.
That is correct, Madam Mayor. I've yet to see him join the meeting. He was sent a link today, and I've also sent a reminder just now to ask him to join, but there's been no response. I don't have a phone number.
Okay, so what I'll do is just read out some of these questions, and if a response cannot be provided tonight, the administration will write to Mr. Luther to provide further information. What does council intend to do to reduce the level of crime in Bassendean? Is there an intent to establish a community watch program and introduce patrols? This is a multifaceted issue. The town does have close liaison with Kiara Police, and there are multiple programs, youth programs, targeting groups that may well be vulnerable. So the town does run a significant number of programs, and the liaison with the police has been quite productive in the past in promoting extra patrols. Clearly, There are WA Police initiatives which I would encourage residents to take up. Bike Link, which allows you to register your bike, and if it's stolen, it can be recovered through that registration. Also, there is Cam Map, which allows residents who have surveillance cameras facing out into the public realm to register their cameras with the police. And that provides a greater level of scrutiny for the police when they're trying to access video footage. So I will ask the administration if there's any further matters I haven't covered, if they could actually write to Mr. Luther to fill in the gaps. The next question from Mr. Luther is, when is the state underground project beginning in Bassendean? So the undergrounding of power is already occurring in parts of Bassendean north of the railway line and Eden Hill and parts of Success Hill. This is scheduled to conclude in December 2022. Obviously, Ashfield had underground power put in some years ago. Western Eden Hill had underground power put in some years ago as well. So it is a slow process, and there are various programs run by Western Power, and local governments must apply for those programs. So council is actively engaged and near misses at the intersection of Kenny and Palmerston. Looking for a fix for this problem. Mr. Adams, I believe that you can provide a response to this question. Mr. Adams, yes, you're with us, Mr. Adams. I just can't hear you or see you. Can I ask?
Sorry, I was indisposed for a moment. Could you please repeat the question? Sorry about that.
Okay. Over the past 5 years, this gentleman has witnessed 2 major crashes and near misses at the intersection of Kenny and Palmerston, and he is interested in what fixes for the problem the town might have.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Madam Mayor. We did check that out this afternoon. We've logged on to the main roads crash data, and there's only 1 crash that's been recorded there in the past year. But we will follow up with the gentleman in the coming days, just to engage with him individually and try and ascertain what the issues are.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank you very much. Okay, so there are no petitions that I know of, and we'll move on to section 9, which is confirmation of the minutes. So can I have a mover for item 9.1a, that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 26th of April 2022 be received? Councillor Carter.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, but before we go any further, could I request permission to join the meeting as a councillor? Thank you.
Yes, sorry about that. And also I need to do a declaration. So before I do that, Councillor Carter, that council suspend the operation of clauses 6.9, 6.12, 6.17, 7.1 and 7.2 and modify the operation of clauses 6.1, 6.6, 6.7 and 6.10 and 6.11 of the Town of Bassendean Meeting Procedures Local Law 2020 for the duration of this electronic meeting, and that these matters be determined at the discretion of the presiding member. So apologies for that, councillors. Miss Mabs, I'm assuming that you had your hand up to remind me to move a motion to allow Councillor Carter to enter the meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. So, councillors, I would like to move a motion to allow Councillor Carter to join our meeting electronically, as she is travelling at the moment. And I would like a mover. So, Councillor McWilliam, your hand is up, and Councillor McLennan, you're seconding. No, Councillor Wilding, sorry. Anyone against? I declare that carried. Welcome to the meeting, Councillor Carter. Sorry, I left you on the sidelines there for a little while. Apologies for that.
That's fine, Madam Mayor, and thank you, colleagues.
Okay. So, going back to item 9, which is confirmation of minutes. So, item 9.1A, that the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held on the 26th of April be received. And I have Councillor McWilliam, your hand is up. Are you moving that? Yes. A seconder?
Apparently, yes.
Councillor Wilding. Anyone against? I declare that carried. The second is item 9.1B, that the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held on the 26th of April 2022 be confirmed as a true record. Do I have a mover for that item? Councillor Wilding, a seconder? I'll second that. Anyone against? I declare that carried. Just bear with me, councillors. So item 10 is confirmation. Oh, sorry, business deferred from a previous meeting. I do not believe there is any. And then we have item 11, which is external committee reports and updates. So 11.1, that the council notes that no documents from external committees have been received within the reporting period. So I believe we can move on from that. Okay. So we now move on to 12.1, which is the items on block. So I'll read out the items that I have coming out of Councillor McLennan.
I just wanted to check. So on the table there, under the ones that council's requested to consider independently, just wanting to clarify the item numbers for 16.2 and 16.3. I think they're incorrect.
Okay.
I think it should be 16.1 is the 11 Hamilton Street and 16.2 should be the Bayways tip pass.
Yep, that's correct. Okay. So moving on to the en bloc. Coming out of en bloc, councillors, I have 12.2, 12.4, 12.5, 12.7, 12.8, 12.9, 13.1, 13.2, both notices of motion, 16.1 and 16.2, which are confidential items. Are there any other items to come out of en bloc, councillors? Councillor Ames.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I please remove of en bloc? I've just got a question that's popped up in my mind this afternoon. 12.6, the review of council policy sports lighting. I just want to ask a couple of questions of the officers just to confirm that that policy can be removed from council moving forward. Thank you.
Certainly, no problems whatsoever. Okay, So can I have a mover to move the remaining items, which is 12.3, 12.10, 12.11, 12.12 and 12.13 on block? Councillor Ames, and seconded Councillor McLennan. Anyone against? I declare that carried. So we'll now move on to consideration of the reports. So the first report that we have to consider tonight is 12.2, which is budget 2022-23 proposed differential rates. And Mr. White, I'll invite you to speak to this item before I open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have anything to add to, I suppose, the introduction I provided at the briefing session last week, but certainly happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillors, I have Councillor McLennan.
Sorry, I was just taking a moment for my microphone to kick in. Mr. White, I just had a question in relation to the amended motion that has been circulated by Councillor Polifka. First of all, I'd just like a comment from you, but I'm also not clear on...
I might just intervene in relation to that one.
Yep.
It's not intended to press that this evening.
Okay, thank you. No questions then.
I have a question for Mr. White. We spoke briefly in the last few days, Mr. White, about councils. Not all councils have declared their differential rating modelling at the moment, but we discussed Vic Park as being modelling that's very similar to what we're putting out to advertising. Would you concur with that view that's almost identical to what we're putting out?
I haven't looked at it for a little while, but yeah, I think it's pretty similar. Yep.
Okay. Okay. And and I do understand that there's a variable amount of there's quite a variation of what councils are doing across the board at the moment, but we don't have a full picture as yet. So, Councillor Polifka, you have a question.
Yes, yeah, just for Director White to, I suppose mainly for the purpose of the public consultation, just to identify the different levers that are available to the council, specifically in relation to where different categories of land are identified. I believe there's two mechanisms that you can either adjust the minimum rate applicable, or you can levy a differential rate, which is by percentage, which is by reference to a base rate. So perhaps if you could explain those and confirm that those are the only two real levers that council has in relation to any category that they establish.
Certainly, thank you, Councillor Polifka, through you, Madam Mayor. So I suppose there's three variables really. The first is the rate in the dollar. The second is whether council decides to impose a different rate in the dollar on a differential basis for a different category of land use or for some other reason permitted by the Act. And the third is the minimum payment. The proposal put to council is to keep the minimum payment for all differential rating categories the same as it has been for the last 2 years, and to propose two differential rates that do have reference to, I guess, a base rate, if you like, that would apply to all residential property. And there's no need for the differential rates to be referenced to a base rate. Council may select a rate in the dollar that applies to a differential rating category. The administration just proposed reference to a base rate, I suppose, because it aids consistency from year to year, and is probably fairly simple conceptually.
There's just one final clarification. So in relation to the base rate, does that have to be the same base rate across the board, or can you have a different base rate in each of the different categories that are established?
Yes, I guess the base rate is a term that we have used, I suppose, just to try and give that some sort of explanation that doesn't have sort of any basis in the Act. So that's absolutely right. Council can choose to apply different rates in the dollar to the different differential rating categories.
I apologise. I think I may have used the wrong terminology. So not talking about the base rate, talking about the minimum rate, which is applicable to each category. So I understand that the minimum rate can be set. I'm just wondering, can the minimum rate that's being set, can that be different for the different categories or not?
Yes, I'm sorry, Councillor, for my misunderstanding of the question there, but absolutely, Council can set a different minimum payment for different differential rating categories.
Okay. Right, thank you.
If I could follow up with a question, Mr. White, my understanding is, and having experienced applying to differential rating last year, is that when this comes back from advertising, that council has the ability to amend, depending on the feedback, the community feedback, we can amend the rating program that has been advertised. Is that correct?
Absolutely, Madam Mayor. So there's a statutory advertising period of 21 days, which will commence at the earliest opportunity following tonight, should council make the decision in relation to this item. And then the council must, firstly, it must consider the submissions. It has a legislative obligation to do that. And secondly, it can only adopt rates as part of the annual budget, which must be by absolute majority.
Thank you, Mr. White. Are there any other questions from councillors? And Councillor Polifka, you are not moving, from my understanding, you're not moving the amendment that you sent through yesterday. So if that's the case...
Not seeking to disturb the recommendation, no.
Okay. So I have an officer recommendation for item 12.2. And do I have a mover for that recommendation? So I'll move that. And a seconder, Councillor McWilliam. Do I have anyone against? I declare that carried. Okay, so the next one is item 12.4, which is the draft local heritage survey, draft local planning policy, heritage and character, and establishment of heritage areas. So I would ask the officer, Mr. Gibson, to provide an overview on this one.
Through you, Madam Mayor. There's been, councils will note that there have been an amended attachment number 2 for the meeting tonight. The changes made since council last saw this last Tuesday are identified in blue in the attachment. There's only 3 of them and they're very minor, but I'll walk through them now nonetheless. On page 4 of the document, there's been a change of reference to the consultant that undertook the town's 2017 municipal heritage inventory. The change was made just to correct a factual error, but it's just basically substituting in the correct consultant's name. Then on page 497, which is the place record for the Success Hill Reserve, which Ms. Bremer spoke to last week, we have taken on board one of her suggested changes and identified that the original use of the site was a natural area and meeting place. That is broadly already covered in the more expansive definition later. but in terms of the matrix at the start of the place record, that's been updated, but again, only a minor change. And the final change is on page 514 in relation to the red pillar box on Surrey Street. That is just to acknowledge that since the 2017 MHI, the pillar box was actually refurbished, and that was in mid-2019. So 3 quite minor changes and don't change the operation or the categories, the listings and the categories of any of the places. But just have sort of slightly improved the document.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Councillors, do we have any questions? Anyone have questions on this item? Mr. Gibson, I have a couple of questions. Can I just ask, in respect to category 1 and 2 properties, they're listed on the town's heritage list, which protects them from demolition. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, broadly that's correct. The heritage list is a different document and different framework to the local heritage survey, but it's related. And if council adopts the LHS tonight, the subsequent task for staff will be to revisit the heritage list, and that will be coming to council at some point later this year. But typically those places that are category 1 or 2 on the heritage survey are included thereafter on the heritage list, and as a result have got some statutory protection against demolition. It's not to say demolition cannot occur, but it just simply requires an application for development approval to be lodged and determined.
So just a second question on that one. I note that some of the listings have been removed because this is mainly, there were a couple of category 3 properties that have been removed because they've been demolished. So in respect to demolition permits issued, obviously category 3 properties don't have the same level of protection. Are there any means by which the officer might recommend how we can encourage, or is there a means by which we can at least encourage some sort of dialogue prior to demolition of category 3 properties? And also that means category 4 as well, but category 3, we have a substantial number in the town, and it would be a real shame to see many of those disappear.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I suppose there's always the opportunity for dialogue and conversations about these things, but from a, like you've acknowledged, from a statutory point of view, there is no protection. So it would be a case of trying to, I suppose, convince the owners of the merits of retaining the place and sort of not demolishing it. There's things that can be done to, I suppose, incentivise the retention of existing heritage places that would otherwise be able to be demolished. Those are already embedded into the planning development local planning scheme regulations, whereby development standards can be applied more flexibly if it is necessary or desirable, so as to protect a place of heritage value. There is already a mechanism in the community funding policy to assist those that wish to take renovation or refurbishment and restoration works. That's largely about sort of dispensation for planning fees. But it would be open to council to do whatever it feels is necessary to try and preserve those places, and if that provided, if that included financial support for those category 3 places, that is certainly something council could explore, but obviously it would have a resultant financial impact.
Okay, I do have other questions, but Councillor Carter has her hand up, so she's next, and that's followed by Councillor Polifka. So Councillor Carter.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is it's on the reserves. Ashfield Flats has given a number 4 category. Why is that when the other reserves are a number 2?
Through you, Madam Mayor, what page do you have the page, Councillor?
Well, I can tell you the number. I didn't write the page. It's the number 233 on your listing. It's for the Ashfield Flats.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I wouldn't have the information off the top of my head. I'd have to sort of read through the document. I'm sorry.
Okay, then perhaps I could get that answered later. My second question is also on the reserves. We don't have Sandy Beach Reserve nor Mary Crescent Reserve listed on our heritage inventory. Is there a reason for that? Because these are also very significant and important places.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we use the 2017 Municipal Heritage Inventory as a starting point, understandably, given that that was the pre-existing document on the matter. As we sort of advised last week, is that we did put out a call to the community to see if there was any interest in nominating other places for assessment and potential inclusion. As a result, I think Point Reserve was added, but there was no suggestion from any councillors nor community members that those two other reserves should be potentially included. It's always possible to amend the local heritage survey at any time. It need not wait the full 8 years. And if council wanted to adopt the heritage survey tonight, but ask staff to look at those two places for addition later, there's no objection to that.
So I can be clear, I can nominate these two places that are not on the heritage inventory, the Sandy Beach Reserve and the Mary Crescent Reserve tonight, even though we pass the LHS in its entirety.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct. So you could recommend the council adopt the local heritage survey tonight, but whether or not council adopts it formally, I can take it that you'd like us to look into those other two reserves, and we can do that administratively.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Plifka.
Yes, the first question relates to, so somebody acquires a heritage property. It's in rack and ruin, and they decide that they're going to renovate that property. Does that have the potential to escalate that from, say, a category which might permit demolition to a category which would mandate the retention of that property?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, it would have the potential. If it was deemed the value of the place had improved such that it warranted sort of escalation up the categories, it could go from a 4 to a 3 to a 2 to a 1, depending on the scale of the improvements and the inherent value of those improvements.
And in terms of how we could communicate that to people or electors, that if they take those measures, that's a potential consequence. I'm not suggesting that would dissuade somebody, but just so that information is available so that people can understand the implications of a decision that they might undertake.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I suppose, again, as with previous queries, we're always able to provide information to residents and landowners. And I suppose whether the implication of providing that information may indeed be sort of contrary to council's broader wishes for those refurbishments to occur would probably have to be considered. And I suppose more broadly, we don't want the idea of the local heritage survey or a heritage list to be seen in such a negative light. Obviously, it comes with statutory controls, particularly in the way of the heritage list. But it also does come with opportunities in terms of redevelopment of the site and the flexible application of development standards, as I referred to before. So there probably needs to be an even balance of information, and the fact that a heritage listing, whether it's the LHS or the heritage list, does potentially come with some statutory burdens and restrictions, but it also opens up funding opportunities through the town, through the community funding policy, through the DPLH's various grants, as well as the flexible application of development standards. So it would probably need to be a more well-rounded provision of information as opposed to just focusing on the potential for the categories to change.
Yeah, I guess I'm just focusing on what people might perceive as a negative outcome, because that's what people tend to dwell on. Whereas the other side of things, which is, will you get this benefit? You'll be given whatever concessions. Nobody's going to complain about a concession that's given to them. But when things go the other way, that can be a source of angst for people. So I'm just trying to work out how we can best manage that. And I suppose by the provision of all of that information, if people are fully informed, then they can presumably make up their own mind about those things. Are we able to, how can we communicate that to people so that they know both the pros and the cons? Because obviously it's in the planning instruments, which you're very well versed in, but the average resident of the town maybe not so much.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I suppose it probably best be done in the aftermath of adopting the local housing strategy, the local heritage survey. In which case we would advise all those landowners that are still on there, and that may well be the most appropriate opportunity to sort of provide some additional information.
And the second question, I suppose, is seemingly, I suppose, less serious, but it's just a matter of curiosity. When we list a reserve, so taking, for example, the Ashfield Flats on the Heritage Survey, I see that the comment there is that there was historical agricultural uses. What does that actually mean? Is that going to facilitate people recommencing those uses, or is that going to be the preservation of any remnants? I mean, I don't know if agricultural activity leaves a scar on the landscape. I mean, perhaps there are flat areas or rows where crops were grown and the like. Is that the sort of thing that we're looking to preserve? I just don't quite understand the intent of putting these reserves on a heritage survey as to what it is that we would seek to preserve.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's, in terms of the local heritage survey, it's really just a collection of places that have some heritage value. Obviously, the heritage list carries the statutory provisions. But I do take the point, the listing of reserves is not as important, arguably, as the listing of privately owned places, because the reserves, particularly in the case of Ashfield Flats, is reserved as parks and recreation under the Metropolitan Region Scheme. So there is a dense layer of protection there that the planning system provides for the use and development of that space that might not otherwise apply to privately owned residential land. In terms of identifying the previous use of the site, that's just in line with the DPIH guidelines for the preparation of a LHS, is that you identify the history of the site, similar to what was done for Success Hill Reserve in terms of it being an important place for Indigenous people, etc. It's just a series of, I suppose, bringing together all the relevant information that make up the heritage value of the place. That's not to say that the place should thereafter be reverting back to any particular use, because in some cases a heritage place has had a number of uses. Some would now be sort of incongruent with the preservation of a heritage place. So it's just simply acknowledging what has occurred in the past as opposed to committing to some future use.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just have one very quick question, Mr. Gibson. My understanding, having spoken to some residents in the last 2 weeks, my understanding is that the offer or the promise of potential heritage incentives may encourage some of those Category 3 property owners to upgrade to a Category 2. Would you concur with that as a potential outcome?
Through you, Madam Mayor, not really. It is not up to a property owner to elect to go to a certain category. That is council's decision. in adopting the local heritage survey, council will decide whether a property is 1, 2, 3 or 4. So in terms of what the incentive would be, council would need to be very clear with what action on the part of the private landowner it is seeking to incentivise. If that action is to not demolish a Category 3 place, for argument's sake, that is something that council could obviously invest time and probably more likely financial resources in if it felt sufficiently strongly that it wanted to preserve Category 3 places that were not otherwise protected under the heritage list. I obviously, as before my time with the town, but I have seen various communications that have referred to incentives, but it was unclear about what action it was seeking to incentivise.
Okay. I do note that there was one property referenced in the documents that because of restoration work that had been done by the property owner was elevated from a Category 3 up to a Category 2, hence why my question came about, because I did note that in one of the properties. So, okay. This probably has no relevance whatsoever, but I'm curious about Guildford getting a broad heritage listing for the entire suburb, and looking at our heritage survey and the number of properties on there, and some of them are stunningly beautiful properties. I'm curious about what benefits the way that Guildford are going. I'm curious about what benefits that might bring them. Is it just a tourist thing, or are there planning advantages to what they're doing? I'm not sure, Mr. Gibson. I thought you might have some knowledge of that.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm not exactly sure what the City of Swan are doing in Guildford, but it could be establishing the Guildford locality or suburb as a heritage area. So obviously on tonight's agenda, we're seeking to establish 3 discrete heritage areas within the district, and they're obviously a couple of small ones, and obviously Kenny Street's reasonably large, but certainly none of them are whole suburbs. It may well be that City of Swan are trying to establish the suburb of Guildford as a heritage area in its entirety. I suppose the benefit of that, or the potential reasoning for that, and I'm speculating, would be that the city in that instance would have a far greater level of control over new development in that suburb, because it would potentially call in all the single houses that would otherwise be exempt from the requirement for development approval. That's speculation on my part, and I'm happy to look into it and provide councillors an update separately, but I don't know exactly off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Gibson. Very detailed responses. Councillors, as you might be aware, I distributed an amendment actually to the officer's recommendation for item 12.4, adding a dot point 4. I would like to move that, but I'll read out the dot point 4 first. We've got it up on the screen. So the extra dot point requests the CEO to circulate to councillors a discussion paper outlining various heritage incentives and programs, preceding formal presentation of a draft heritage incentives policy for consideration by council within the next 6 months. Councillor McLennan.
Thanks for that, Madam Mayor. I just had a query noting that when you sent this through earlier today, the officers had a query around what you would be seeking to incentivise, and I'm really keen to understand what exactly it is that you would be wanting to incentivise through these mechanisms if it was adopted by council.
Thank you for that. Having explored some of the heritage policies and incentives that exist in other councils. They're quite diverse, and I found it really interesting, particularly City of Perth, to note the diversity of their incentives that they offer. Now, clearly this is designed to encourage the owners of heritage properties to retain them. Oh, that's the main aim, to encourage them to retain those properties. Now, with category 1s and 2s, it's not such a issue, but with category 3, which makes up the bulk of the heritage properties in our town, and noting that some of them had already been demolished, I'm curious about exploring ways in which we can incentivise those property owners to retain those properties rather than bowl them over with demolition. So that was the intent. And as with all policies and incentives, some may work, some may not, but unless we actually explore them, we won't even have an idea of what is potentially available to us, what levers we can pull.
And do you mind if I just ask Mr. Gibson, given what you've just said, if that would provide the officers with enough guidance around what it is that council was seeking?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think so. Yeah, that certainly helps. So if I can sort of just paraphrase it just to make sure, that we'd be looking to investigate what incentives we can implement to incentivise residents and landowners to retain their category 3 and or 4 buildings that could otherwise be demolished without the requirement for redevelopment approval.
Yes, that's pretty much it. I do think, though, that council, we're a small council, and it may be that some of the incentives that are offered by other councils will be beyond us, but it would be an exercise for us to actually explore the different options and possibly, and I say this possibly because I'm asking for it to be considered by council. I'm not asking for us to implement a whole suite of incentives, but simply to consider what's out there and what might be applicable to our towns. So that's what I'm asking for in that extra dot point.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. So I would like to move my, I move the officer's recommendation with the extra amendment, and I have Councillor Polifka. You're seconding that, Councillor Polifka?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, do I have anyone against? No, so I declare that carried. Now, apparently, I have to go back to 11.1 to get a mover that council notes that no documents from external committees have been received within the reporting period. So do I have a mover for that? Councillor McLennan, seconding Councillor Wilding. Anyone against? I declare that carried. Oh, Councillor Ames, you put your hand up.
Yes, mouse malfunction there. It's all good.
Okay, so I declare that carried unanimously. Going back to the reports, and apologies, councillors, for that. Okay, so we have item 12.5, which is draft local planning policy, sustainable development, sorry. And I think there'll be some questions on this one. So, Mr. Gibson, again, if you have anything to comment on this, Mr. Gibson.
Through you, Madam Mayor, not particularly, but I do note that Deputy Mayor McLennan is likely to pursue an amended motion, and I'm happy to take questions on that.
Okay, so I do know that there have been some email exchanges this afternoon, and I just wanted, Councillor McLennan, I'm hoping you can clarify where we're at with that now.
Oh, I was just wanting to confirm that I would like to move the alternative motion that I have circulated when that opportunity arises. What is it that you're wanting me to clarify though? I think most of the emails were around making sure that councillors were referring to the correct attachment that I've referenced in my alternative.
I just wanted to make sure you're comfortable with that now.
Yes, it is all as it should be.
Thank you. Okay, so are there more questions on this item? So I'll invite Councillor McLennan, has already indicated she'll move her alternative. I'm happy to second that. Is there anyone against?
Councillor Hamilton, can I just seek to clarify if you'd like me to read out what the amendment is, or the alternative is? So, councillors, we have 2 points to the officer recommendation. My alternative makes a change to point 1 and would be as follows. So, pursuant to clause 4.3 of Schedule 2 of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015, adopts draft local planning policy sustainable development as advertised, contained in attachment 7, with minor amendments as identified in the officer report, to be applicable for all relevant applications lodged on or after the 1st of July 2022. And then point 2 would read as per the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Before we proceed, Councillor Palifka, you have your hand up.
It wasn't a question, that was to speak against the alternate in favour of the officer's recommendation.
Okay, so Councillor McLennan has moved her amendment. I've seconded that. Councillor Palifka is against, so we'll enter into debate. Councillor McLennan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the staff for preparing the draft policy. It's an initiative that I really welcome and I believe reflects the community's desire to have high quality sustainable development in our town. As a council, we have agreed that encouraging development in our town is a priority, and this is reflected in our community strategic plan, our draft local planning strategy and scheme, as well as our differential rating strategy that we've adopted earlier this evening for advertising. However, we have also committed to ensuring that environmental sustainability is a focus. We've committed to being guided by the One Planet Living principles for our decisions, which includes sustainable water and zero carbon energy, which includes making our buildings energy efficient and supplying all of our energy with renewables, both of which are directly relevant to this draft policy. As we know, our vision, which was developed in consultation with our community, articulates a desire for us to be a community and a local government that takes environmentally sustainable actions for our town, our state, our country and our planet, and to be a proactive local government that makes brave decisions and enables positive change. I believe that the expanded policy before us is an example of council showing bold leadership and making decisions that deliver on the expectations of our community. I'm sure over the weekend, everybody paid attention to the election. It was historic and it was transformative. And I believe it demonstrated that as a nation and our community, the expectation that climate change will be taken seriously, and those in positions of leadership such as us will use our positions to effect change that will contribute to tackling this challenge. The officer's report identifies that sustainability measures proposed will require an insignificant increase in the cost of development. However, any initial monetary cost is not the only factor that we should be considering, and in isolation I suggest that this is an outdated measure. The environmental cost also needs to be taken into consideration. Any development that we approve today can be expected to remain a feature of our community for several decades. Therefore, poor quality developments that prioritise minimising financial cost to the developer in the short term at the expense of long-term environmental benefit and financial savings to the occupier, I don't believe are in the best interests of our community. As noted in the report, there was limited response to the public consultation on this matter. The industry bodies were not concerned enough to provide a response, and the majority of those community members who did respond were in favour of broadening the scope of this policy. To me, this demonstrates that there's very little concern about the proposal, and this has been supported by the extensive responses on social media. When I posted about this policy, it reached over 4,000 people, and there was only one single unsupportive response. So I'd really encourage councillors to support the sustainable development policy being expanded in its application and to demonstrate leadership in alignment with the community strategic plan and our priorities. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McLennan. I'm supporting Councillor McLennan's amendment because we can all drive through areas that are hot, uninviting, where people live in environments that are not particularly healthy or comfortable. To walk the walk and talk the talk, we need to be strong in our decisions. So sustainable development has been something that many of my fellow councillors have spoken about, not only this council but the previous council. It has been a pillar of this council, an ambition to improve the quality of what is our living environment. As Councillor McLennan indicated, whatever is built now will be with us for decades to come. So I think it is important that we mandate improved sustainability sustainable developments. We have our local member of parliament is interested in sustainable water management. We have solar uptake, which is less in Perth than what is desirable, and yet we have a perfect climate. Encouraging people to uptake sustainable initiatives, it needs to come down to more than just encouragement now. It needs to be mandated. And this is an important aspect of ensuring that into the future, our town is an environment where people wish to live, that is attractive, and where it's comfortable for them to live. There's no use in mass producing buildings that are less than ideal. So in this respect, I would encourage councillors to support this amended motion. And I will now ask Councillor Polifka to come into the debate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I certainly don't disagree with anything that either the Mayor or the Deputy Mayor have said in relation to our opportunities to minimise our town's effect on the environment. All of the climate issues that we're currently facing are real, and they're something that we should tackle. My concern relates to housing affordability. So there's two things that we're trying to balance here. Our obligation to preserve the environment to the extent that we can, but also our obligation to ensure that people trying to break into the housing market are not straddled with additional expenses. 13,000, as is identified in the officer's recommendation, for a first home buyer who might be operating at the less expensive end of the market, 13,000 is going to be a large proportion, or a comparatively large proportion, of the value of the house and land that they might be seeking to construct within the town. As regards other people who can afford to take those measures, I'm fairly confident that given the nature of our community, those people that can construct environmentally responsible dwellings would elect to do so. It's just a matter for me of, at that lower end of the market, are we pricing people out? Are we imposing something on somebody that, if they had the money, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to step up to the plate and do their bit for the environment. But for those who are operating on a very tight budget within increasingly difficult circumstances, with the cost of living increasing, wages not going anywhere, and the interest rates now on the rise, I just hope that we're not, in the pursuit of an admirable objective, squeezing out those who can least afford to do that. And as I said, I'm confident that the members of our community that have the means to do so will voluntarily enact these measures, and probably measures beyond that which we're seeking to mandate. But my concern does come back to those that for whom this may be an insurmountable obstacle, and those that haven't been having a good trot of late, that we probably shouldn't be putting any more impediments in their way. So completely agree on the environmental side, but just concerned about housing affordability.
Thank you, Councillor Plifka. Are there any for the motion to debate? Any councillor wishing to debate against the motion? Councillor McLennan, would you like to close?
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, and thank you, Councillor Polifka, for your contribution. And I agree with you that housing affordability is an issue that is facing many people in our community and beyond, and it's something that we do need to take into consideration. I would, however, challenge the assertion that affordability is going to be largely affected. As noted in the officer report, it's an insignificant increase in the cost. I would argue that we need to take into consideration the long-term financial benefits that some of these proposed measures would introduce to households. So reductions in the cost of power, in the costs associated with heating and cooling a dwelling, the costs associated with water through the use of grey water. These are things that people who are on a low income will benefit them long after the purchase of their house, and will make up for that initial cost in a very short period of time. We also need to remember that it's not only property owners who are targeting this policy at. There are many developers who come into our town and, as we have seen time and time again, deliver poor quality, cheap construction. This is often a source of dismay for members of our community who want to see high quality development. So an introduction of a policy of this nature would ensure that those developers who may have sought to introduce the cheapest possible development now are required to provide a product that is going to deliver a higher quality dwelling for our future community members. I'd also ask Council to consider why we have a sustainable development policy at all. So even if this was to apply just to the split coded land, why do we think it's a good thing to require those property owners that want to develop at the higher density to introduce sustainability features to their developments? And it's because we know this is a better outcome for our community. So if it's a better outcome, why are we not requiring this for all dwellings throughout the town? This will benefit everybody, the property owner and our community, plus the environment. So a good time for us to revisit our priorities, again, identified in our community strategic plan, that includes leading environmental sustainability, providing visionary leadership and making great decisions. So I'd encourage you all to provide that visionary leadership and make a great decision tonight by supporting the alternative motion. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Councillor McLennan. Okay, councillors, I'm going to put this to the vote. And first of all, I will ask all those councillors who are in favour to raise their hand, and then I will go around the group and call out your names. So, sorry, my hand won't go up. Okay, so I have in favour Councillor McLennan, myself, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Wilding, Councillor McWilliam, Councillor Ames and Councillor Carter. So councillors, if you can put down your hands now, and Councillor McWilliam, if you could put down your hand. And against, Councillor McWilliam, you've got your hand up again. So against,
I am not against, I'm for the motion. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So against, I have Councillor Polifka. And I'll just check that the minute clerk has got all those names.
Yes. Yep. All good. That's for your for Councillor McLennan's amendment motion.
Yep.
Yeah.
So with that, I'll declare that carried. And we will move on to the next item, which is item 12.6. And Councillor Ames, you brought this out of en bloc. So if you would like to ask a question or your questions of the officer, that would be excellent.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm trying to get my video up, but unfortunately it's not going, but you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, yep, we can hear you.
Fantastic. So
And I
through
believe
you,
it's Mr. Gibson, you'll be the officer dealing with this, correct?
yes, absolutely. And through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Gibson, I'm all for the officer's recommendation for the sports lighting policy, but just to, I suppose, move into the future, we have been discussing recently within the administration in town upgrades to a lot of the districts within the town. That obviously includes Ashfield Reserve, Jubilee Reserve, and Bassendean Oval. Is there going to be any administration or council dramas moving into the future with these lighting upgrades? We all know that the majority of these precincts do require lighting upgrades, but with not having a sports lighting policy, is there going to be any roadblocks regarding the different lux levels that are required for different, I suppose, what we're looking for here, for different applications within the sporting precinct? So, for example, for events, like our community events that we have, for training for our particular sporting clubs and associations, and I suppose more so for the Bassendean Oval, where we've got state and potential national-based teams that require higher lighting lux levels. Is there going to be any pushback or roadblocks if these areas have been upgraded with their appropriate lux levels that this lighting policy may assist with now? Or is there facility for these lighting upgrades to be, I suppose, approved based on their lux levels?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I suppose going back to one of your comments, Councillor Ames, the policy itself doesn't actually provide any real decision-making assistance, so its absence will not be an issue. Even without the policy, there's the relevant Australian standards on sports lighting, and the department, or the then Department of Sport and Recreation, now Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries, has a sport and recreations facilities guide that sets out the relevant lux levels for the relevant sports. So the town would more appropriately use those documents and frameworks to guide any decisions regarding future lighting upgrades.
Yeah, fantastic. Mr. Gibson, I suppose that last comment you've said there is, I suppose, all that needed to be, verbally said. So I'll leave it with that. Madam Mayor, thank you very much. I believe there's another question regarding this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ames. Councillor Politica.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Gibson. So just back to those governmental standards, are those purely for recreational sports, or where a ground is used for sport at a higher level, such as our oval? Would we be limiting the ability to have those facilities upgraded to, say, we're taking the oval, for example, a waffle or an AFL level, or would we be restricted to having just a recreational level of lighting?
Through you, Madam Mayor, policy or no policy, really the only restriction is on council and its decision making in terms of, most significantly, the budget. The Australian standards and the department's guidelines go into, for each sport, the different levels. So whether it's amateur training or semi-professional games or professional games with broadcast, it's got different lux levels. So there's plenty of information there to guide decision making. So the absence of this policy dating back to March 2014 will not in any way impede subsequent decision making of the council on upgrading to sports lighting infrastructure.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mr. Gibson, apologies, I'm actually trying to bring up the policy but cannot get the attachments to come up in my docs on tap, and I'm getting an error, a 404 error with the town's website, so I'm going to have to just go off memory. Part of that policy indicated a process where users, sporting groups that use facilities and where the town has increased lighting, obviously at a cost, there was a paragraph in there about those users contributing to the financial cost of that installation. So how is that, if this policy is removed, how is that aspect going to be dealt with by the administration in respect to the installation of new lighting infrastructure?
Through Madam Mayor, it's broadly embedded into the CSRFF framework, which is managed by the department. So whilst it's broadly covered in the policy also refers to the CSRFF program, which is premised on a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 model. And I would say this is that when council in the last couple of years has been talking about lighting upgrades for most notably Bassendean Oval, not once did any council or community member refer to this policy because it just doesn't provide any legitimate decision-making guidance. Councillors and the football club in that instance understood the need for a co-contribution from a number of parties because it is embedded into the CSRFF framework.
Okay, and lighting upgrades, are they all generally via that program? Because obviously that's a grant program, or do we have other areas where we don't apply for those grants?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm not aware of what may have occurred prior to my time with the town, but in the last 3 years we haven't really upgraded any lights. But any time we've spoken about lighting upgrades, it has been on the assumption that there would be some co-contribution from both the state and from the user group. That said, it would be very much open to council to fund 100% of any lighting project, or alternatively, simply require the club to fund it if they were so able. But as has been the custom, most of the discussions have revolved around the co-contribution model provided by the CSRFF framework. Thank you for that.
Sorry, I just had a question from Ms. Canier. No, thanks, Ms. Canier. I don't believe any other councillors have questions on this item. That being the case, we'll just go to the officer recommendation that council revokes council policy 5.17 sports lighting. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Wilding. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McLennan. And anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. So we'll move on to item 12.7, which is asset management policy. And I believe this is Mr. Adams. If Mr. Adams would like to address this in any way.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Further to last week's briefing session, we have a couple of amendments that were added in red, which includes in clause 8, section F, for the inclusion of the One Planet Living principles. In addition, we have found a typo within the asset management policy, which is Clause 9, Part B, it refers to the asset consumption ratio, and the last part of the paragraph being the ACR between 0.5 and 0.7, and that should be between 0.5 and 0.75. So I need to make that slight adjustment. But apart from that, that's the summary, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so all of those amendments that you have just mentioned, Mr. Adams, I'm assuming that the minutes clerk and yourself have a copy of those changes?
Not as yet, but I'll send them through. Yeah.
Okay, so we can assume that those changes, which are primarily typos, will be attended to. Councillors, do you have any questions of Mr. Adams in respect to this item? No. As you're all aware, I circulated an amended recommendation, well, an amended motion. Now, I do understand that the officers have no problem with the amendment I made in clause 1. And councillors, if you like, we've got it up. I'll read out my potential amendment that Council 1 approves the updated asset management policy attached to this report, subject to the following amendment. Clause 8F, insert the word prioritised in front of One Planet Living principles. And 2, requires the asset management policy and supporting documents such as the asset management strategy and asset management plans to be provided for review by new councils within 6 months of each local government election, so every 2 years. And 3, amends the policy review date to reflect the intent of the previous dot point 2. I would like to actually move that amendment. Now, before I do, I'll invite Mr. Adams to provide his perspective. I can see his officer's comment here. Mr. Adams?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. I suppose in response, there's no issue, obviously, with including the word prioritise. In regards to, I suppose, the other components or part 2, the asset management strategy and asset management plans to be provided for review by council within 6 months, and I think that's what we did with this new council. We provided that information for the councillors, for all the councillors and for the new councillors, and it's probably a good idea for even the existing councillors to refresh their memories on asset management. So we don't have any issues, any significant issues, but we do consider that's the business side of things that we attend to from as we go through the election cycles.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Can I actually ask a question? I note that your suggestion to bring that review date to December, would you not agree that new councillors, when they're elected in October, that the volume of information piled on to new councillors when they're first elected is quite huge? Would you agree with that?
Yes, yeah, that's true, and you know, it's probably not a high priority to have it is a high priority, but probably not right up there in the top few to have the asset management data. So I think this year we had a plan for when the new councillors could, you know, have their boots under the desk, so to speak, for a short period of time. And I think we presented the information in March from memory. I think we even presented it in the bulletin earlier for those who were keen to go through that information, but we did the presentation in March. Yeah.
Thank you. Ms Mabs, I note your hand is up.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I guess in looking at the proposed amendments, certainly the first and the third is not an issue, and with regards to the third, it can be aligned to a date biennially that allows any new council to consider the policy and the supporting framework, which is the strategy and the plans. Certainly the plans and the strategy are proposed to sit within the administration. So whether it's a review in December or whether it's February, if that could be set and reviewed biennially, certainly as part of the councillor induction, the integrated planning and reporting framework, of which the asset management framework is a key component, is covered off and was covered off with this council. And it's really the practice, I guess, and responsibility of the CEO to deliver that induction. So that is already a practice that is happening, and it really falls to the responsibility of the CEO in providing a fulsome induction for new councillors. So number 2 was not considered necessary as such.
Thank you, Ms Mabs. Okay, so councillors, I have moved my amended motion, and I would ask if there's a seconder. Councillor Wilding and Councillor Plifka, you had your hand up, but you're against, or you were trying to second?
Yeah, trying to second. So yeah, glad
Councillor Wilding beat you to the punch.
No,
Okay.
Good to see. Thanks.
Okay, so I've moved my amendment. Councillor Wilding has seconded. Do I have anyone against? I can't see any other hands going up, so I'll declare that carried unanimously. So, councillors, we will move on to item 12.8, which is adoption of the quarterly report period ending the 31st of March 2022. I'm not sure, Ms Mabs, did you want to speak to this item before I open it up for questions?
Only to suggest, Madam Mayor, that following Councillor Plifka's suggestion at the briefing session, we've amended the terminology. So long-standing practice is we refer to resolutions as being deleted once they reach the end of their life in terms of work being undertaken. We've now changed that word deleted to closure, so recommended for closure. So hopefully that is a little less ambiguous. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillors, are there any questions on this? So I have a question, and I can't bring up the attachment, and Ms Kenny, don't worry about bringing it up on screen, but I think it was the last resolution of council on that list marked for deletion, and I've got ROC 18/63106. It was one of yours, Mr Adams, you're the officer for that one. I think it's page 882. And I'm sorry, I have not got it up in front of me. I actually thought that was current. Mr Adams, would you just like to give a quick overview of that particular resolution of council?
Yes, certainly, Madam Mayor. I was just trying to bring it up. Yeah, so that resolution of council was to pertain to Lord Street and Walter Road East, and the councillors, I think, can read it for themselves. But for council to endorse its official position to convert Walter Road East into from an existing 4-lane road into a 2-lane road with a tree-lined boulevard, and maintain Lord Street as a single lane each way with a tree-lane boulevard as well. The town has advocated council's position to the Department of Planning and Main Roads, and they've come back, and we just haven't just done one advocation. We've gone to Main Roads and the Department of Planning on numerous occasions and had quite a few discussions with them on that, and on the basis that they're both district distributors, the state government doesn't support that motion that was put forward, and the current traffic volumes for Lord Street are around the 20,000 vehicles per day, which is equivalent to what's on Guildford Road. And it's foreseen into the future that traffic volume is going to grow. In regards to Walter Road East, that's also seen as an important district distributor as well. The state government sees important to the road movements of the district into the future. And I suppose just from an engineering or transport perspective, I suppose having been in the industry in Perth for 25 years, there's one thing that's quite evident with the Perth metropolitan road infrastructure, and that's that it's very fragile. And most of that fragility is due to the river and rail crossings. And if you do look at a map of the road network, there aren't very many crossings. And when there is an accident, the road network performs very, very poorly. And I think that's the big driver for Department of Planning and Main Roads to try and maintain those networks and spaces where they've got them for future planning and to handle future traffic volumes. And I think as a town we need to see ourselves as a part of that greater network. Hopefully that explains our position on that. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. So I've got a couple of hands up. I have Councillor Plivka and Councillor McLennan, but I also have the CEO. So councillors, if you don't mind, just quickly go to the CEO and then we'll go to Councillor Plivka, followed by Councillor McLennan. Miss Mads.
Thank you.
So, Miss Mads, we can't hear you.
Apologies. Sorry, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to mention, since Mr. Adams updated the quarterly report, we've obviously had a notice of motion from Councillor McLennan with respect to Lord Street, which has been supported. So it's now a live resolution, which obviously we'll be managing, and we've got some timeframes along that, and we'll be doing the planning in 22-23 for Lord Street. So that continues on. But yeah, in regards to Walter Road East, if the feeling is that this should remain open, we can certainly do so and reference it as part of our long-term financial plan. Thank you.
Thank you. My preference is that it remains open because it's not just Lord Street, but I'll just ask, I've got multiple hands up in front of me. So Councillor Plivka, you have a question?
Yes. Yeah, so it's just concerning Walter Road East and the feasibility of having one lane going in each direction. So obviously east-west we've got Guildford Road, and we've also got Morley, and north-south we've got Lord. Do we need an additional dual-laned road in Walter Road East, or can we just say, well, you have these other roads that can be used, they have the capacity, we want to earmark Walter Road East as something a little more special than just being used for through traffic?
Yeah, certainly at the moment, through you, Madam Mayor, certainly Councillor Poliska, the current road volumes would lend itself to that. But the state government planning for Walter Road East is, it pertains to the future Metronet stations down there, and they're seeing the route coming down from the city of Swan in Lord Street through Walter Road East as an important linkage.
So in that regard, is there anything that we can do, or is this a done deal and we're stuck with 2 lanes going each way?
Can I interrupt there, Mr. Adams? Councillor Polifka, there is a town transport plan that was quite comprehensive. And if you don't mind, I think we'll swing over to Councillor McLennan, because I have a fair idea of where Councillor McLennan might go with this, which might actually answer your question. So, Councillor McLennan.
Oh, gee, I'm glad you know where I'm going to go with this, Councillor Hamilton. Mr. Adams, we've had lots of conversations about this. I know we have differing opinions on how the town should approach this particular, or both streets, really. However, I'm just a bit unsure why the staff are recommending closure of this motion, because in my mind, that doesn't make council's position go away. We would need a rescission motion to change council's position on this. We have this resolution, we have the transport plan, now we have the recent Lord Street tree planting, which is just a subset of what council's current position is. But I'm just not sure what closing this actually achieves, because it doesn't change council's official position.
I suppose from our perspective, from my perspective, I don't see there's nothing else that I can really do. We've advocated to the Department of Planning, we've advocated to Main Roads. I don't see it being achievable. We're not going to be able to, the town won't be able to build anything on Lord Street or Walter Road East without state government support. And I suppose I agree with the state government's position that it's Lord Street with 20,000 vehicles per day. I don't think we can shut it down to or create a 1 lane each way, and that's my I suppose engineering perspective on that.
Yeah. Obviously, this is a discussion that we need to have at another time rather than as part of our quarterly report receiving. However, I just kind of feel like it's a council resolution, and the officers then deliver the council resolution whether or not they agree with it or think it's a bad idea and roll their eyes and go, gee, silly councillors. It's currently the adopted position of council, and I just think that unless that's actually rescinded, that is what the staff should continue to advocate for every time there is a discussion with the state government. So that was why I was asking, like, what is closing it achieving? Because it doesn't change what council's official position is.
Yeah, so I suppose I totally agree that if I disagree with what council says, then that's by the by. But I was just sort of putting forward the why, I suppose. We've advocated as much as we can. We haven't advocated once. We've advocated many, many times. And the response from state government has been pretty clear. And I suppose my intention was to bring it back to council, as I felt like I've done everything that I can do to implement council's resolution. And I suppose I wanted to bring it bring it back up, because I suppose every quarter I'm reporting on it, and I can't see myself moving it any further. And I suppose that as part of my role, I need to bring it up to council. And if council, and I knew this wouldn't go through easily, if at all. But it's up to council to say no, we want to keep it on the book. So I suppose I was just trying to play my role.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, and I suspect you may be right.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. You're correct. It wasn't going to go easily. Sorry, Councillor Carter, I know your hand is up, but I did cut Councillor Polifka off before. So if we could just make it one quick question, Councillor Polifka, then Councillor Carter.
The question's probably more for the CEO, who I see had her hand up before as well. It's more of a question of a procedural nature. So where council has a resolution, which is an impossibility. So I'm hearing from the Director Adams that when it comes to doing what we want to do on Walter Road East, the state government has control of that process and is saying no. So just by way of a procedure, so where council has an active resolution which is objectively determined to be an impossibility, what then happens? So just a process question, and probably more for the CEO.
Thank you, Councillor Polifka. It's a really good question, and I've got to say I've never come across one of these before. This particular resolution talks to a position of council, and I think the comments are correct, is that the administration can't change a position of council. And we certainly have gone in strong and tried to advocate to state government in terms of council's position. We've been given some clear responses in writing from both the head of MRA and also Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage. But council's position is still that, and I guess procedurally I would need to get some advice on how we deal with this. Do we keep it ongoing as a open resolution, or is there some other way of dealing with it?
So councillors, I'm going to wind this up because Councillor Carter's had her hand up. So Councillor Carter, one quick question. And the reason I'm going to wind it up is because I'm aware that some councillors have not actually had an opportunity to examine the town's transport plan. And I think it would be advantageous for councillors to have information on that, to understand why some of us are wishing for this to remain active and open. So Councillor Carter.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. That was precisely my question. Could the transport plan be given to us, the new councillors? And secondly, nothing's impossible, as we found out from the history of Bassendean. Thank you.
And Councillor Ames, one last quick question and we'll move on from this particular one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Always good to get the lucky last ones in. And through you to Mr. Gibson regarding one of the notices for closure just below that, just in regards to the Bassendean Oval business case. No dramas with that, but there's been comments that requests have been made to the various funding partners regarding the available funds that were left over for that case. Do you have any update regarding how those requests have been or are tracking at the moment?
Through Madam Mayor, I can. So basically, I contacted the representatives of the funding sources. To date, I've received one reply, and that was from Development WA in lieu of the former Landcorp, and Development WA. Basically, their corporate position was that they needed to have the money returned to them. So we are making arrangements to do that, but yet to hear back from the other funding partners.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. And how much was that particular funding off the top of your head, if you know? I know that was broken into 3 different values.
Through Madam Mayor, it was I think it was about $4,000.
No worries, so no massive loss of life or limb. Thanks, Mr. Gibson.
Okay, councillors. Now, I did have some additional questions regarding the quarterly report, but I'm actually going to leave that and just take that up with the CEO on Thursday when I meet, rather than go through each of these, because we've already spent a bit of time on this item. So removing ROC 18-63106, which was the one regarding Walter Road and Lord Street, I would like that resolution of council removed and not closed. Do I have, taking that out, do I have a mover to receive the quarterly report? Councillor McLennan, and a seconder. I'll second that. Is there anyone against? I'll declare that carried. And just checking with the minutes clerk that that particular resolution of council will be removed from that list for deletion or closure.
Yes, so just checking, that was number ROC 18-63106.
Correct.
Thank you.
Not that I've got it up in front of me to be able to confirm that. So I'm just going by handwritten notes. If it's wrong, I will certainly let you know. Okay, so we move on to 12.9, Children's Services. And I believe this is Mr. White. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have anything to add to what we spoke about at the briefing session last week. It's just pulled out of en bloc because it requires an absolute majority decision of council.
Okay, councillors, are there any questions on this one? Okay, so do I have a mover for the officer recommendation? Councillor Ames, do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilding, is there anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. Sorry, councillors, if you just give me a minute. So with that, councillors, that concludes the reports because all the others have been carried on block. So we now move to notices of motion, which are available in front of you. So the first one is my notice of motion 13.1 regarding notice boards. And can I ask the staff to put that up on the screen if possible? Maybe. If it's not possible, that's okay.
I don't have that one just yet. I'll just bring it up on the agenda.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry about it. So, councillors, clearly I've put up this notice of motion for notice boards. Are there any questions on this item? Oh, that's straightforward. Okay, well, I would like to move this notice of motion. I see here that the staff are supportive. Do I have a seconder? And I did see a hand go up, but it's gone. Councillor Polifka. And so I've moved it. Councillor Polifka has seconded. Is there anyone against? Councillor McWilliam, you have your hand up. Okay. Councillor McWilliam, you have your hand up again. Are you against?
No, I'm not against.
Okay. Okay, so I've moved. Councillor Polifka has seconded. Is there anyone against? I'll declare that carried.
Thank you, Mayor.
Having some problems there, Councillor McWilliam.
I am indeed.
Okay, so we'll move on to notice of motion 13.2, which is project update spreadsheets. I will allow the officer to provide their feedback on this. I'm not sure which officer. Would that be you, Miss Mads?
I am happy to provide comment on it, Madam Mayor. Most of those reports are already provided as part of the budget process. So the notice of motion was considered unnecessary. The issue in regards to the, sorry, I've just lost my place. The final report, which is May, I think, from memory, is actually quite problematic for us. And whilst it's suggested that the project update spreadsheet be provided up to the end of May, be provided in early June prior to the annual performance review, there's little, if not any, relevance to the annual performance review. So that was not understood. But it's also occurring at a time where particularly the governance, the finance team are at their busiest, preparing for end of financial year audits, the budget, etc. And this is just another report on top of that. And particularly that last one is considered to add very little value at all. And if we look back at the budget process for this year, I think there's been fulsome information provided in the way of spreadsheets, project updates, etc. We also have other mechanisms as well, the CEO bulletin where we report on project milestones, the quarterly report, and obviously the monthly reports to council as well. So I guess the notice of motion was considered unnecessary, but that last dot point, that is a real hurt issue for us in terms of resourcing. It will take us away from critical work to focus on a report that we really don't believe will add very little value. I'm not sure whether Mr. White would like to add any further comment.
Thanks, Peter, and through you, Madam Mayor. No, probably just in terms of resourcing, I suppose the final point is, it's at the same time we're going across to staff in relation to planning for the budget process. As part of that, we're looking at projects, carry forwards and so on anyway, and discussing all of that with council throughout the months of sort of March, April, May, as part of the budget process in any event. And to produce sort of a separate report on a different template that requires manual production, at the same time as we're asking all of the managers throughout the organisation to prepare template reports for the budget process, is going to create problems for us, not just in the finance team, but across the organisation, and it'll take us away from actually delivering the projects to spend time preparing manual reports to report on them. We would like to think that, as the CEO said, we're providing information on our key projects all the time through various discussions and ongoing updates through the CEO bulletin and so on. And where projects are at key stages of delivery, there's regular communication. So I'd agree with the CEO in relation to the final point. It will cause us some problems, and we'll need to resource that because we're not currently resourced to produce those reports.
So before I go to you, Councillor Ames, if you don't mind, could I just ask a question there? Were these project spreadsheets not the creation of yourself, Miss Mads? in the first year when you commenced with the organisation in 2018?
So there's probably been an evolution since I commenced. One of the first things I did as a new CEO was just try to get a handle on all the outstanding council resolutions and projects, because there was such a significant volume of work which concerned me, and it lacked focus. And I used that as the basis for a workshop with councillors to try and get a better sense on what was important and try and get it down to the top 20 projects. And I guess we've tried to maintain that discipline and rigour. And I think as time has gone on, the project spreadsheets have been refined and we've provided them more regularly, and also enhanced the information we provide through the CEO bulletin as well. So, yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. So now I know in the past, and I think you would agree with me, that there have been occasions where the requests for these project spreadsheet updates, the response has been that they could be provided monthly. Do you agree that that has been a response provided in the past?
I think we might be talking about different things. Maybe the finances.
No. Okay. Anyway, I will ask one more question.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I might be able to address your last question, if that's okay.
Yep.
The project spreadsheets that just show the progress of the spend can be provided on a monthly basis to council via the bulletin. That's not a problem. So that doesn't provide a project update or any narrative. It's just a one line with the name of the project, the budget, the starting budget, the current budget if it was reviewed or changed at any point during the year, and the current spend versus the budget, and also if there are any purchase orders that are coming up, that will be included as well. So that is something that can be reduced really quite easily by the administration, because we can automate that report and have it produced by Synergy. It's the larger, more fulsome project reports that are problematic.
Okay.
The green ones. The big green ones are the difficult ones.
No. I provided a sample, which I was advised to take that sample off, the pictorial sample off the notice of motion, because it was from another council, even though it was a publicly available document. And what you have described is pretty much what that sample was. It was from a neighbouring council and it's provided to their council monthly. If you're talking about the project spreadsheets that used to be provided, which were pages long, that is not in any way, shape or form what I'm asking for. So I have, okay, I'm a little bit disturbed that I haven't got that pictorial now in front of me.
And that part I understood was relating to point one of the motion. So update project updates in each financial year, a simple spreadsheet format that includes columns identifying those things. And our response there is we're providing that anyway. It was provided as part of the bulletin on the 6th of May, and it does include the same information as what was included on the neighbouring council's example that was provided initially. So that is, we believe, is currently the process. The other project update spreadsheets,
no, they're the same.
I thought they were the larger green documents that are provided at the start of the annual budget process around February.
No.
They're the difficult ones.
No. All I've ever asked for were the simple spreadsheets to be provided. And I remember, if you recall, Mr. White, I indicated didn't need them monthly, but just 3 times a year. Not that there's no way I would actually impose on the organisation in that way. They are the simple spreadsheets that have columns and identify what you described previously, which was, you know, purchase orders, which I don't even need to know about, but identifying potential carry forward, because as you get further into the year, the potential carry forwards become more relevant. And identifying completed projects. It was the simple spreadsheets. The timelines in point 2 are only to actually provide a timeline for when I would like those particular simple spreadsheets. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And that certainly that can be provided up to the end of December. Or for the end of December, provided in February, prior to the mid-year budget review. That's not a problem. And second point there, to be provided in the first week of May, that's fine as well. I guess probably the last one. By the time we get to that point, we're probably talking about all these projects and carry forwards and so on in much more detailed terms. But a report can be run. I apologise. I was of the impression that that what was being sought was the sort of far more detailed project updates.
I would never do that. I'd never do that to you.
So
I would never do that.
You know, these monthly simple updates can really be provided as often as is desired. I would only say that there's not much point providing them in the first few months of the financial year because it's sort of too early for us to have done much. But other than that, that's not a problem. If the format of the bulletin item of the 6th of April was considered useful, then that's that can be reproduced fairly readily.
So Councillor Ames has had his hand up and he's been very patient. So Councillor Ames, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks very much, Madam Mayor, and either through you to Mr. White or Ms. Mabs. What's the town's functionality or ability to be able to have live documents of such information that you require, Madam Mayor, for interaction at any time for any councillor? I know that some might be a little bit more operational based, but there's been many organisations that require many more individuals, than us as an administration and council to have either read or edit or comment privileges on different documents that can be notified by that particular administrator or council or so on. So my question is really, you know, we've got a spreadsheet that can potentially be transferred to a live online, accessible and secure option. Is that a positive solution to not only some of the documents that you're asking for within your alternative motion, or also within your motion, but with many, many more documents within our town? So I'm not sure if that's a question for yourself, Mr. White or Ms. Mabs, or whether it's feasible for all documents that are of a working and operational nature to be put into a live mode on a platform that is secure, you know, like Docs on Tap or like a Google Drive, for example.
Mr. White? Okay.
I guess there's a few questions there. This particular document that we're talking about here, it is just a line item of a project with some figures on it. It's not proposed to have a project update in narrative form. That's I guess the portion or the misinterpretation in me preparing the officer response to that third point that was going to be a bit of a stumbling block for us. So, so there's probably not a lot to comment on. And I suppose in there's no problem with us sharing material, and one of the ways could be Docs on Tap to share material that may otherwise be shared via the CEO bulletin. Whether the request extends as far as sort of having live access into a system that would have narrative updates or prepared by the administration, that is problematic because that imposes a requirement, a significant administrative requirement to ensure that all of the information that is in those 100% of the time has been properly input, vetted, been through a approval process, and so on and so forth. So, you know, something that might be entered by somebody in the field on a database, an internal database, if it was to be for council consumption, firstly, there's a question as to whether or not that's appropriate. And secondly, if it is, there needs to be a proper process to go through to ensure that that material is suitable and has been approved by the various channels. So I think, I'm not sure if I've answered your question. I'd be happy to sort of maybe take it offline and have a more fulsome discussion, but the town and its current systems is a long way, I think, away from perhaps having that full integration that you're seeking.
Yeah, no, and I fully appreciate your comments regarding, you know, who's actually inputting data and who's reading it, and if it's been vetted by, you know, X, Y, and Z for council consumption. So totally understand that. I was just also maybe bringing to forefront, you know, technologies nowadays that can have, you know, pretty live access and, you know, different levels of security or accessibility or comments that maybe moving forward, they can be more so considered for engagement with, you know, all relevant parties that would like to get some sort of info at the click of the finger.
Yeah, certainly agree with that, Councillor, and hopefully Docs on Tap and our doc assembler is maybe a step in the right direction, or an early step in the right direction down that path, but thank you very much.
Okay, so councillors, we have notice of motion in front of you. I'm moving that notice of motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilding. Do I have anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. So, councillors, we'll move on to item 14, which is announcements of notices of motion for the next meeting. So I have one. And Amy, I will send this through to you in Word format. The notice of motion reads that council requests the CEO to implement the following ongoing schedule commencing from July 2022. 1, briefing agenda documents to be provided to councillors 1 day earlier, that is on a Wednesday rather than the current schedule of a Thursday. And 2, that briefing agendas are to include all items proposed to be considered by council at the subsequent OCM, with exceptions for items of an urgent nature that may be included in the OCM agenda under clause 5.5 of Meeting Procedures Local Law 2020. And I will forward that through. So that's proposed for the next OCM in June. Okay, any other councillors with notices of motion for the next meeting? No, I don't have any urgent business for tonight's agenda, which then brings us to confidential business. So before we go behind closed doors, I saw your hand go up, Councillor McLennan.
I was just moving to go behind closed doors. Sorry for jumping the gun.
Okay, so before we go behind closed doors, and whilst we still have the recording going, I'll go through the councillors to ensure that you are in a safe and secure place for the consideration of confidential material. So we'll start with Councillor Carter. Are you in a safe and secure place?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I confirm that I'm in a safe and secure place.
Councillor Ames.
Safe and secure.
Councillor McWilliam.
Safe and secure, Madam Mayor.
Councillor McLennan.
Yes, I am in a safe and secure place.
Councillor Polifka.
To the best of my knowledge, I am in a safe and secure place.
And Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can confirm that I'm in a safe and secure location.
And I too am in a safe and secure location, albeit a bit cold. But anyway, councillors, do I have a mover to go behind closed doors for the confidential items? Councillor McWilliam, I think, and for moving, and Councillor Wilding seconding. Is there anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. And we'll wait for